What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YJ from Zero back with another Yata format video. And this one is going to be pretty exciting as this is, I don't even know how to describe this deck. I do know how to describe this deck. It's machine OTK reasoning. But just like looking at this conglomeration of cards, this looks like a monstrosity and I love it. This is actually a deck that I didn't build. I was talking in the Discord how I was planning on covering reasoning soon. If anyone had any cool sort of deck lists, then I'd be happy to sort of show them off on the channel and try them out. And so I checked through all the reasoning decks that have been posted on the channel in the past, and this one actually belongs to the Discord user Colgate. So big shout out to them for making this really sick deck. But it looks like a monstrosity on paper. And to be fair, I think there are a lot of potentially suboptimal cards in here, things that I would change. Something like Time Eater, I don't think Time Eater is good. I get that it's another 6. It's a machine. You can limit and removal it up. And 1900 attack isn't bad, but I think you could probably change this out for something else. Your opponent is likely going to be calling 6 a lot of the time because Jinzo is a problem. So like the two levels that they'll call is probably 6 or 4. So I don't really think you need another 6 in the deck. That could potentially just be a major brick and is not even the best if you summon it out. But I wanted to go with their original build here just to see how it would do because, looking at this thing, it looks like crazy, right? It looks like a jank pile that's, it has to get super lucky to actually win stuff. But testing out the deck and playing it, I think that there's actually a lot of stuff in this deck that synergizes very well and could potentially kill your opponent out of nowhere. So this is machine OTK reasoning, and you could definitely build a more standard reasoning deck or a more standard machine OTK deck. But I'll probably just go with this for the coverage of those decks on the channel. If people, test out those decks in the future and want to share the deck list with me, then I'll definitely play them. But after playing this list, you can't go back. You can't go back to the standard stuff. You need the spice. And this deck definitely brings the spice. So let's go through the card by card. First up, we've got Pharaonic Guardian. It's a 5, which your opponent is likely never going to call. And it's very good if you bring it out because it's got piercing and also draws you cards, which is very, very nice. You've got 2 Barrel Dragons. And this may seem like a really weird inclusion, but it's level 7. And also, it's 2600, pops an opponent's monster potentially, so it can really help out with the OTK push. You got a Cannon Soldier as well to deal that last bit of damage, also a machine, which is very nice. We got a Dark Ruler Hades, a very good level 6 monster, even if it's not a machine, and this card can just be devastating to bring out on your opponent. And also with the 1 tribute monsters here, you don't necessarily always have to bring them out off of a reasoning. This deck is playing things like Change of Heart, like Snatch Steal, like Premature Burial, things that can, give you tribute fodder on field and allow you to bring out these monsters naturally. Although Barrel Dragon is a bit tougher to do than the Parshath, Hades, and Jinzo. We've also got a Sangan here. Now, you'll no Witch in the deck is another level 4, and I think Colgate didn't want to have too many level 4s here. And Sangan can search out things like Cannon Soldier, which can end up the game. It can search out Spirit Reaper to buy you more time, and also can search out Sinister Serpent as well, which is a good target for meta, which we will get to in a second. So Sangan isn't bad here, but you could potentially add a Witch in the future if you wanted to. Also, we've got the Reaper, which, as I mentioned, good for stalling. Also can get in on hand rips, which is nice. And also is a unique level 3, so it's likely that your opponent is not going to call that off of reasoning. We've got the Time Eater. I already shared my thoughts on this card. I don't necessarily think it's that good. Maybe it could be replaced with something like another Parshath or just something else entirely. But I'm not the biggest fan of this card, even though it is kind of neat. If it destroys a monster by battle, your opponent skips their next main phase 1, which will potentially stop them from getting a productive battle phase their next turn. And just force them to play defensively. So that's kind of nice. And there are also 2 copies of Mechanical Chaser here, which is actually a very good beater in this format. People aren't necessarily playing things like Gemini Elf and in as much volume as they were in previous formats. So the 1850 on Mechanical Chaser can be nice. And also with limited removals and it being machine, you can actually get pretty out of hand quickly if you draw multiple limit removals. For these spells, we got Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Graceful Charity, Heartbeat's Feather Duster, Heavy Storm. I think in the future I'd actually replace this with a True Nade, as there have been a couple instances that you might see in the games that I show off today, where, I've had Heavy and it's like, damn, I really would like to True Nade here to potentially try for the push, but in a way that doesn't just eliminate all my back row. So yeah, I think that Trinade is probably what I'd replace this with in the future, but it's not a bad card by any means, and can have some utility in some decks. So there's also triple limit removal. This card is insane at 3 copies. Like I think Machine OTK is actually a majorly slept on deck in this format because this can just kill you out of nowhere. And you might see that in some of the games that I show off here. We've also got a Metamorphosis package here, and this is because you've got a lot of good targets. Parshath can go into Dark Balter the Terrible. It can also go into Reaper on the Nightmare, or Fiend Skull Dragon as well. You've got Barrel Dragon, which can go into Last Warrior from Another Planet, which can just be such an impressive card to bring out against your opponent. You've got the 6s, Hadass, Jinzo, and Time Eater, which can go into Ryu Senshi, which is not that bad. It can also go into Super Robo Lady and Super Robo Yaru, which likely will never come up, but you're playing a deck with a lot of limit removals, so potentially metaing a Hades into a machine can be pretty nice. And you've also got the Sinister Serpent for your 1,000 Edge Trick plays here. Now, the one change that I made to this deck before playing it, despite my misgivings with like some elements of the main deck or the side deck, I only made this one change, and that was to add a Dragoness of the Wicked Knight and a Darkfire Dragon, just to sort of give you more coverage on the levels for your Metamorphosis. Because I played a Metamorphosis deck in the past on the channel, and there actually was an edge case where being able to bring out Dragoness off of a Spirit Reaper actually did come up and win us the game. So I think it's good just having these cards for those very, very edge cases. They likely won't come up, but they're good to have. And, I basically just cut one Fiend Skull Dragon, and I think one Ryu Senshi as well. Because realistically, like, you're not going to need to go into multiple Fiend Skull Dragon or 3 Ryu Senshi in one game here. For the other spells, we've got Mirage of Nightmare, Monster Reborn, Triple Mystical Space Typhoon, Pot of Greed, Premature Barrow. This can bring back your big monsters that you're potentially going to lose to Reasoning if your opponent calls it right. We've got a Raigeki here as well, a Reasoning package, 3 Reasoning, very, very good. And a Snatch Steal. For the traps, we've got a Call of the Haunted Imperial Order, Mirror Force, Raigeki Break, and Ring of Destruction. I really like Raigeki Break and Ring of Destruction in this deck. Honestly, maybe going up on more Raigeki Break in the future could be pretty good, as you do occasionally brick on things like the Barrel Dragons, and just being able to pitch those cards, potentially being able to bring them back with Premature, Reborn, or Call later, and just go for a lot of damage that way can be pretty nice. For the side deck, it's kind of an interesting side deck. I would make some changes here as well. I'd probably add some more monsters besides just Tyrant Dragon. I did swap in the Tyrant Dragon for the Time Eaters after game 1. It's a level 8, which is nice, as it is a bit difficult for your opponent to call. There's no DMOC in this format, so your opponent isn't naturally calling 8s. And 2,900 is nothing to scoff at. Plus, the second attack thing is pretty nice. We've also got Confiscation and Delinquent Duo, along with Forceful Sentry, to potentially bring in if you're going first. Having a hand rip package can be pretty nice. We've got a Trunade here, I assume, in case you're up against a more back row heavy deck. Again, I'd probably I'd probably switch heavy for Trunade, although I didn't actually do that in siding until game 3. We've got Double Knock here to just get even more aggressive. And also, if you're up against a more flip-focused deck, this can be very good. Double Scapegoat if we want to lean more into the 1,000 Hydro Trick side of things, or if we're up against a more aggressive deck, this can be pretty nice. We got Triple Barrel Behind the Door, which is pretty cool against burn decks, although realistically this only really affects Ring of Destruction, but another way to deal damage to your opponent, and that can be pretty good. And lastly, Triple TT, I assume also against more aggressive decks. But again, big shout out to Colgate. I think this deck is awesome, even if I do have some minor nitpicks. And I think this is a very good basis for like people to build off of more in the future. I think Colgate also has like done some more tinkering in this deck and has made future adjustments after doing this initial build. But I think this deck is really sick. And to really show you why I think this deck is sick, let's dive into some games and see how it actually plays. We've got a game against Soul65. Always a pleasure to have them on the channel. They're a frequent guest on the Discord and the channel. So always a pleasure to have them on. We're playing the Machine OTK Reasoning deck. Honestly, going into this game, I didn't have the highest hopes because, the deck is kind of a hodgepodge and does need to get lucky occasionally, but this is a pretty killer opening hand. There are potentially ways in which we win off this hand, which is pretty wild to say. They're not common, but, they can happen. Unfortunately, our opponent's just going to T-set pass, so they're not playing into our Snatch Steal. Very sad. And we're going to think about exactly what to do here. You could potentially save Reasoning for later in the game. but I'm just going to fire it. I mean, I'm like, we're playing a sort of balls to the wall deck, like just got to go super aggro. So I'm like, sure, let's just do it. Let's fire that reasoning. They've got IO, we've got MST though. So we will be able to pull off this reasoning. They're going to call 6. They do not get it right. We've got a Serpent. So that will come out to field. Kind of an underwhelming reasoning, honestly, but I mean, at least we've got Serpent in rotation now, which can pair well with our Metamorphoses later. We're just going to set this Reaper, pass back to them. It does play a little bit into things like Raigeki or Dark Hole, but we've got Mirror Force to potentially stop aggressive pushes. They do fire the Raigeki here, and they're going to hit in for 14. We're just going to Mirror Force that. We do not want to lose the limiter removal in hand here. They're going to go for a Rhoda, bring out Gearfried here, and they're going to summon out that Gearfried, set 1, pass back to us. We draw meta, so we can potentially just go for the Thousand Eyes Restrict play here. We got to hope that they don't have Blast with Chains. This will be able to interact with this. We're going to tribute off our Serpent for meta, and now what they actually have to do here is they have to chain Blast with Chain to the Metamorphosis if they want to keep the Gearfried around, because if you chain Blast with Chain to the effective Thousand Eyes Restrict when it comes out in the field, then you still will be able to pop the Restrict, but the Restrict will also be able to suck up the Gearfried before you are able to pop it. So you will lose the Gearfried if you do that. So they don't necessarily know this ruling here, but it's fine. They would have done this if they had known. So I just play it as if they did it, and it's something good to keep in mind for the future. So we're just going to set this Snatch Steal here. Hopefully they'll use up spell and trap removal on it. Of course, this would be pretty bad if they were able to bring out Zalug, get rid of the limiter removal. But ultimately, I think this is fine. We don't necessarily want to play into Harpies. And if we do lose the Snatch Steal, that would die to spell and trap removal either way. They're just going to hit in with this Gearfried, though, and then set 1, pass back to us. We draw Mechanical Chaser, which can clear the Gearfried, so we feel very, very good about that. We're just going to do that, hit over that Gearfried, get in for 50, then pass back to them. Kind of unfortunate. I would have liked to have set the limiter removal here as well, just as a safeguard. But we've got Snatch Steal to bring out if they do bring out a monster bigger than Mechanical Chaser. We can just take it, as Gearfried is not bigger than Mechanical Chaser, and the only thing that really stops Snatch Steal besides MST is Gearfried. So I feel fine about this. But I was just going to set 1 and pass back to us, though. We draw Change, and that could be pretty decent. We don't necessarily want to use it yet, though. But indeed, we are just going to go for it, see what they've got, and we're just going to hit in. We're not going to play into TT here at all because that would be really good for them. And then we're just going to pass back this Sangan. So kind of unfortunate, but again, I think this deck does want to get aggressive and just change of heart, Snatch Steal, limiter as much as it can just to chip their opponent down and get in for lethal potentially. We're just going to hit into the Sangan. It's got to go at some point. And having this Raigeki as a follow-up is pretty nice later on. We're just going to pass back to our opponent. Again, we could have set the Serpent here just to keep more of a board presence, but I don't really think it's necessary at this point. Opponent's just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Raigeki Break, which is really good with the Serpent in hand. Given that they set a bunch here, we play around in case they've got like Morphing Jar. I think this was a misplay. It's a bit of a temptation to do that occasionally, but I think they're just trying to mask their Mirror Force. And if they've got Harpies, then this is kind of rough for us. The Snatch will die at the Harpies either way, but we want to preserve our limiter removals, and the Raigeki is really good as well. So yeah, this is kind of rough. We do have Raigeki Break to chain to it, but yeah, a bit unfortunate here. Opponent's going to draw 3 off that Charity, discard 2, and then we're going to think actually on resolution whether we want to go for this Raigeki Break. I think we just want to keep it, and yeah, the reason why we go for it is if they potentially have a Faith set that they can then get back the Graceful Charity off of. But I think it's fine. Ooh, Pot of Greed here on top of it. That's kind of rough. They're going to go for a Yata here. That's fine by us. They're going to hit in for 200. We will indeed just Raigeki Break the Yata, popping that. They're then just going to set 2, flip up a Wanghu, and pass back to us. That's ultimately fine. We draw a Cannon Soldier here, which we won't be able to bring out and get in damage with because Wanghu will pop it. Now, I feel fine. We're just going to go for a Snatch Steal here, try and take it. Anyways, they've got MST for that, which is unfortunate. But I feel fine just setting this Sinister Serpent here and keeping the Raigeki on field. They didn't have Harpies in hand last turn, or else they would have fired it for sure. So I'm okay preserving the Raigeki on field for a little bit longer. And they also can't bring out a Don Zalug or a Spirit Reaper under Wanghu. Or they'd have to set it if they do want to bring it out, and then we can Raigeki the board after that. So I think this is ultimately fine and a pretty stable position for us. They're going to think a bit, and they will bring out Yata Loop, which would normally get popped by Wanghu, but I just let them set it. It's fine. Again, this is not like a competitive like tournament match. So I think it's ultimately fine. And also we've got Raigeki on field either way, so it won't matter. So they're just going to set that, pass back to us. We draw Dark Hole, which is actually potentially better than Raigeki, and we are indeed just going to fire that. Now, maybe I should have just fired the Raigeki to play around like Harpies a bit more, but I think this is also fine. We're going to get in for 1400 off cancel, just pass back to them. Maybe we should have like gone for limiter and tributed this off, but I think I'm fine saving limiter for later. Unfortunately, they have change of heart, so they will be able to get rid of the cancel that way. Also get in a bit of damage here. So we will take 5 from that. And they're just going to fire Forceful to deprive us of that last card in hand. So kind of unfortunate here. We draw a limiter removal for turn. We can't really do anything with that. We'll just pass back for them. They're just going to set one, pass back to us. And Premet could potentially end the game. We're going to go for Premet here. And we're actually going to bring back Chaser. Now, this is a bit of a greedy play. We could potentially just Oh, wait. No, it's kind of our only play. Because we don't really have any other good targets. Because the Restrict was not properly summoned. So we won't be able to bring it out off that. But they will let the Chaser go through there. They've got a TT there, which will get rid of the Chaser, unfortunately. And they've got a Wanghu here as well. So we would hit in for 17 here. And we're getting pretty low. We need something good here. Reasoning is a pretty good card if it goes off. We're going to fire that Reasoning. Oh, we should have added back the Serpent. Oh, no, wait. The Serpent's gone because it's been forceful. But they're going to think on the Reasoning there. And they're going to call 6. And we get a 7. So actually, this is just the end of the game here. We're going to go for the Barrel Dragon just to try and pop their monster if we can. But this is just the end of the game. Because even if the monster stays on field, which it will because we only get 3 tails there, we've got double limiter, which will get the Barrel Dragon over the Wanghu. We also have Raigeki to clear the Wanghu anyways, if we just wanted to get in with 1 limiter. But I think that this is fine. And also it forces them to preemptively activate Imperial Order if they've got it before the damage step. I think they already used it up, so we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, this will indeed be the end of the game if this all goes through. We're just going to hit in to the Wanghu, fire double limiter, and that will indeed be the end of the game. So that was pretty sick that we got to see the double limiter go off, plus the Reasoning bringing out the level 7 Barrel Dragon onto the field. Very, very exciting to see. And that's how the deck can just win out of nowhere occasionally, if it can. And so I think that was an awesome showing for the deck. Let's just dive into game 2. I think the only change I made in siding here was I sided out the Time Eater for a Tyrant Dragon. I do keep in the Heavy instead of the True Nade, because I don't quite realize the True Nade is better than Heavy at this point. But I will realize that this game, as you may find out. So we have a great opening hand here, like absolutely stellar. Our opponent's going to go for a Painful, and we do not want to give them any of the hand rips there. So we're just going to give them the Sangan. The Reborn can translate into a Sangan anyways. So I think this is ultimately fine. Opponent's going to set to summon a Gearfried here and fire a Mirage as well. So they will be able to start getting some additional cards here, which is quite unfortunate. We've got a pot, and they're going to think about this, which may imply that they've got IO, but it looks like they do not. So we draw some good ones of our own. However, we don't really have anything to do with this hand this turn. Now, if we Reasoning and bring out something like, a Mechanical Chaser, a Serpent, or a Reaper, and then tribute over for Hades, hit in to the Gearfried, that will give us something to do. But in the meantime, we don't actually really have anything to do here. So we just got to hope that they don't call like 4 or something, but unfortunately they do call 4, and that will hit the Mechanical Chaser there. So we're just going to set the fort and go for a Mirage here, just to try and draw into the stuff. Now, if they've got like Harpies, this is pretty bad for us, but we also do get to keep the cards we draw off Mirage if they do have Harpies. So they're going to think about exactly what to do here. In draw phase, they will just blast with Chain on their Gearfried in order to pop the Mirage here. So that's a sort of neat thing that the Gearfried deck can do when playing Mirage. But yeah, this might be kind of tough for us. We don't draw an out to the Mirage here, which is quite unfortunate. But we potentially have options for next turn. And we don't necessarily care too much about discarding these tribute monsters that we can't really use proactively anyways. Opponent's just going to set one, set another, pass back to us. We draw Snatch Steal, which isn't really the most helpful against Gearfried here. But yeah, we're going to have them pick 2 to discard, and they hit our Parshath, which is kind of annoying. We would have liked to have had that. And they hit the Reasoning, which is really rough, as that's the one active thing that we can really do this turn. So we're just going to set this Snatch Shield, pass back to them, and they are going to think about this a bit, and they are going to just allow us to draw more off Mirage. That's pretty good. Actually, I just realized something that I could have done last game, or not last game, but earlier this game to potentially have been a really good play. We could have ringed their Gearfried when they activated the Blast with Chain. And if we had done that, then the Gearfried would be gone. They wouldn't have been able to equip, and then the Mirage would have stayed on field, which would have caused them to discard. It also would have prevented them from getting as aggressive. So I think that ultimately probably would have been the best thing for us to do here. But I guess we didn't think of it at the time. We're going to go for Mirror Force now because we want to get them to come more board. Also, we want a zone open for if we draw MST for Mirage. Unfortunately, we do not. But this hand is not the worst. Premac can bring back cards. Well, now it can't. But, we've got some potentially other good cards to keep here. They're going to pitch the Barrel Dragon, which honestly I'm fine with that being gone. It was not really helpful to us in hand. We're just going to set the limiter and pass back to them. Now we are at a bit of a risk because if they don't bring out a face-up monster and we draw MST, we won't actually be able to use it because our zones are clogged. We're kind of just hoping that they will commit a face-up monster board so we can ring it. But yeah, if they play around that, then we are in kind of a tough spot. They are going to let the Mirage fire again. They're going to flip up this Gearfried, which thank goodness that's up. We can now fire a ring on the Gearfried, pop that, and now we've got a zone open for our MST. So they're going to think a little bit, checking our graveyard here, and they're going to just set one, pass back to us. And Heavy is, if it was Trunade, this would be a really, really good hand potentially. Because we've got Mechanical Chaser, we've got 2 limiter removals. So we're getting to the point where that is lethal damage. If we're able to stick that on field and, have it there for a remaining turn. So it might have been good. It might have even just been good to just get the Chaser to stick here potentially. But it looks like it sticks either way. And then next turn we could potentially go for the Trunade play if we had it. But unfortunately we do not. And I don't think in this game it necessarily would have mattered because of what they do next here. They're going to bring out Zambira, activate Change of Heart, call the Haunted back, the Gearfried, and unfortunately, they do have a ring set as well. So this will indeed be enough to finish us off. I guess the Trunade would have... No, because we wouldn't have Trunaded this turn. We would have Trunaded next turn. So, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered either way. I mean, I guess we could have just Heavy Stormed the board away, just clearing their back row here, which wouldn't have been the worst, I guess. I guess, yeah, because they wouldn't have had Sangan in grave yet for the call, but I don't think it would have been the best. We also would have gone pretty minus here as well. So, yeah, I think that ultimately it was kind of a tough spot. But I do like Trunade in the deck better because you do wind up in those situations where you've been setting a lot for Mirage and you just need to go for an OTK push that turn, but you don't necessarily want to like preemptively fire your limiters. Then I think that Trunade is a better option there as opposed to the Heavy. So we do side in the Trunade for the Heavy in game 3. And besides that, I think I keep the deck pretty much entirely the same. So let's see if we can do a bit better in game 3 here. Again, there were some misplays I made in game 2. I think that the ring on the Gearfried when the blast was fired would have been very, very good. But hindsight's 2020, as I said. So yeah, we open a pretty good start. We're going to go for Graceful, and we draw Tyrant Dragon. That's a bit of a brick. We're going to discard that. It's also nice because our opponent can't revive Tyrant Dragon. I mean, we can't really either because we're not playing any other dragons. But if they get like a Reborn, they can't just bring this out as a big beater because they have to treat a dragon monster. So we're going to pitch that Tyrant Dragon and an MST. We're going to fire this pot. And this is a really, really good hand here. We're just going to set a Sangan, set a TT, pass back to our opponent. We don't need to fire Reasoning this turn as we can't get aggressive with it. So I feel good about this. If they summon on a monster, we TT the board, search for Sangan, and potentially go for lethal push next turn depending on what Reasoning gives us. If not, we've still got some options. We can flip up the Sangan and then TT that way. So pretty good. They're going to bring a Witch, which I don't necessarily want to TT here because then they get a search off that. And it's a little bit unfortunate. They're going to go for a Mirage Nightmare here as well. which is kind of rough. We draw a Serpent, which is pretty decent to draw. I mean, not the best. I guess if we had TT'd before, then we would have potentially searched the Serpent and not drawn that. But I think ultimately this is fine. We're going to go for a Reasoning here, and that's going to be fine by them. And they call 4, which they do miss because it's a Barrel Dragon. So I feel very good about that. They're going to think on the summon. They're going to go for a Ring of Destruction here. And the fact that they don't go for TT means that, to me at least, that they don't have a TT set, because they would have fired TT here, because it's very good from their perspective. They get the Witch Search. They clear 2 monsters on our field. And then they've got the Ring for if we bring out an additional monster after that. So they do just ring the Barrel Dragon, and I could potentially chain Limiter to the Ring, get 5,200 on the Barrel Dragon. We both drop down by 5,200. They're at 28. I then bring out Mechanical Chaser next turn, hit in for 1850, and then potentially ring them on the following turn to win the game. I think that this ultimately would have been the better play, but the reason I don't do it is because it puts us in a very precarious position as well. And if they do have just ways to stop us, like, I mean, I don't actually know what would stop us here. Maybe a Scapegoat would potentially stop an attack off the Mechanical Chaser. Then this could potentially turn out bad for us. So I go for the more conservative play here. I think, honestly, in hindsight, I should have just gone for the greedier play. But ultimately, it works out fine for us. We're going to bring out this Mechanical Chaser, and then in the damage step, we're just going to use Limited Removal, dropping them down to 1,700. And now we've got a call, we've got a ring, we've got many ways to just end the game here on the spot, pretty much. So I feel pretty good about this. They do have MST, and they're just going to blind fire it. Or no, they're not. They're going to hit Mirage, not blind firing it. But this is going to be a bit tricky for us. They're going to go for Forceful and hit the Cannon Soldier there. And that's we really wanted the Cannon Soldier because that would have been able to do the last bit of damage. If they summoned out Zaluk here, we could have just ringed it and then just, summon out Cannon Soldier next turn to kill them that way. They're going to bring out a Yata here, and we could potentially just, ring the Yata, but I want to potentially kill them, so I'm going to try and call I guess I could call Mechanical Chaser or Barrel Dragon, or I could just call the Sangan. And then this way, if they've got like Raigeki or Dark Hole in main phase 2, we at least get a search here. We can search out the Cannon Soldier, and that represents lethal. So I think this is better in that way, and also it's still representing lethal on board because we can just attack him with Sangan on our next turn and then ring it the same way we would ring like Mechanical Chaser or Barrel Dragon. So I think this is ultimately fine. They're going to Reborn target the Barrel Dragon that we've got. And that's ultimately fine. It gives us another way to win here. They're going to set one. We're going to ring in the end phase in case the set was a book. It was just a Scapegoat. But yeah, that will just be the end of the game here. So we will indeed win. And wow, what a game. I mean, I think this deck really showed how powerful it can be, despite how jank it may seem at first. I mean, it's going to be jank either way. Like, there are hands that you just brick, your reasonings don't go off, and you just lose the game out of nowhere because the deck just, like, out-tempos you and gets aggressive before you can. But I think that this match was a really good showing for the deck and shows how powerful it can be if things do go right for you. And I think that, like, they surprisingly went right for me twice. And maybe that won't happen in the future. In future testing, maybe the deck won't do as well. But I think in testing, Colgate also said, like, the deck was surprisingly good. And I think that once it's optimized even further, the deck can get even better. So, I think this deck is really sick. I hope more people experiment with it in the future because, I mean, it's just so, so cool. And I really had a blast playing these games with it. And again, if people experiment with reasoning builds or machine OTK builds that are a bit more standard and not using both of these cards in conjunction, then I'll definitely test them out. But honestly, this is satisfying enough for me to consider both decks kind of covered at this point in my coverage of the format. And honestly, like, I think playing them this way is not just a gimmick. I do think that it helps out a bit because, Limiter with a Mechanical Chaser, you can't quite kill your opponent with 2 limiters unless they've already taken some damage. You need 3. Whereas getting out like a Barrel Dragon or a Jinzo, just cheating it out with the reasoning, can allow you to just OTK with a lot less effort, a lot less limiter removals. And so I think it's a pretty neat deck, and I hope that more people try it out in the future. But if you enjoyed this video, definitely leave a like down below. Also, be sure to subscribe if you want to see more awesome Yata content and also content in other retro Yu-Gi-Oh formats. Also, let me know what you think of this deck down below in the comments. I look forward to our discussions as always, and I think this deck will provoke a lot of discussion. So I'm excited to talk about it. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGR from Zero, and I'm signing off.